Picture a young millionaire, Mark, fleeing a gilded cage. An arranged marriage forced by his ruthless parents to secure their empire. His escape leads to Fair Haven, a coastal haven where he meets Elise, a barista with a warm smile and a hidden past tied to a disgraced tycoon. As their hearts intertwine, secrets unravel. A vengeful enemy threatens Elise's future, and Mark risks losing everything for love. Will they conquer their pasts and build a life together, or will shadows tear them apart? Stay tuned to find out. Trust us, the twists will keep you guessing. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button to never miss a heartfelt tale, and drop a comment with your city to join our global community. Will Mark and Elise find their horizon? Listen to the end for a love story that redefines destiny. The chandelier above the Hayes Mansion's dining room cast a cold, crystalline glow over the mahogany table, its light fracturing into sharp glints on the silverware. Mark Hayes, 27, sat rigid, his untouched plate of roasted quail growing cold. The air was thick with expectation, the kind that clung like damp velvet. His parents, Marcus and Evelyn, had summoned him with urgency, their cryptic message hinting at a family matter too grave for phone calls. Mark's pulse quickened. He was no stranger to their discussions about the Hayes Corporation's latest acquisitions or his role as heir. But tonight, the silence between clinks of cutlery felt different, ominous. Marcus, a man whose presence commanded boardrooms, cleared his throat, wiping his lips with a monogrammed napkin. "Mark," he began, his voice a low rumble. "It's time you truly step into your role in this family." His steel gray eyes locked onto Mark's, unyielding. Mark raised an eyebrow, a flicker of unease sparking in his chest. "And what exactly does that mean?" he asked, his tone cautious. Evelyn, ever the poised matriarch, forced a smile, her pearl earrings catching the light. "It means we've found the ideal person for you to marry, dear. It's the best decision for you and the company." Her words landed like a stone in still water, rippling shock through Mark. His breath caught, and a short, disbelieving laugh escaped him. "Marry? You can't be serious." "We're not joking," Marcus cut in, his voice slicing through the air. "Her name is Olga Petrova, daughter of Russia's biggest oil tycoon. A union with the Petrovas will secure contracts that could double our market share." Mark's mind reeled. Olga Petrova, a name he'd seen in business reports, a woman whose icy demeanor matched her father's ruthless reputation. "You want me to marry a stranger for a deal?" he asked, his voice rising. "For the business?" Evelyn reached for his shoulder. Her touch meant to soothe, but it felt like a leash. "Mark, Olga is remarkable. Yes, she's 45, but she's mature, intelligent." "45?" Mark interrupted, his laugh now edged with hysteria. "She's 18 years older than me. Have you even considered what I want?" Marcus slammed his fist on the table, the silverware jumping. "Stop being immature, Mark. This isn't about what you want, it's about what's best for this family. You're privileged to be part of something great, but that comes with sacrifices." "Sacrifices?" Mark shot to his feet, his face flushed. "You mean my happiness, my freedom, my life? You don't care about me. You only care about the damn company." Evelyn's voice softened, but her condescension grated. "Don't be dramatic, dear. Olga is sophisticated. You'll learn to admire her, maybe even love her. These things take time." Mark's bitter chuckle echoed. "Admire her? I don't know her. You're shoving me toward a woman who could be my aunt, all for money. How do you think this ends well?" Marcus rose, his towering frame a wall of authority. "If you refuse, you're on your own. No company, no family support. Is that what you want? Because I won't let you ruin what I've built over a whim." The word "alone" struck Mark like a physical blow. His father's stubbornness was legendary, but this was a betrayal. His eyes stung, but he swallowed the tears, refusing to let them see him break. "So that's it," Mark said, his voice steady but laced with pain. "Obey, or I'm nothing to you." Evelyn stepped closer, her hand outstretched, but Mark raised a palm. "No, Mom, don't. You've made it clear I'm just a pawn in your chess game." Without another word, he shoved his chair back, the screech of wood on marble piercing the silence. He strode through the mansion's grand foyer, portraits of Hayes' ancestors glaring down as if judging his defiance. Grabbing his car keys from the marble console, he didn't look back. Outside, the night was crisp, the stars hidden by city smog. Mark slid into his sleek, black convertible, the engine's roar a defiant scream against the suffocating quiet. As he sped through the city's neon veins, Marcus's words looped in his mind. "You're on your own." He loved his family, but at what cost? His dignity? His soul? The road stretched ahead, and with each mile, the weight of expectation loosened, replaced by a reckless resolve. He needed to think, to breathe, to find a life that was his own. Instinct guided him toward Fairhaven, a coastal town he'd visited as a boy, where the ocean's rhythm had once soothed his restless heart. The city gave way to winding roads, the salt air creeping through the open window. Mark didn't know what awaited him, peace, answers, or just a fleeting escape. But as the first signs for Fairhaven appeared, illuminated by his headlights, a spark of hope flickered. This impulsive journey, born of anger and desperation, was about to lead him somewhere he never expected, a place where the waves whispered of new beginnings, and a chance encounter would rewrite his destiny. The first light of dawn crept over Fairhaven, painting the horizon in hues of coral and gold. Mark Hayes' convertible rolled to a stop outside a weathered hotel, its neon sign flickering vacancy in the salty air. Exhaustion clung to him like the dust on his dashboard. He'd driven through the night, the hum of the engine drowning out his father's ultimatum. "You're on your own." The ocean's gentle roar beckoned from beyond the dunes, a stark contrast to the sterile silence of the Hayes mansion. Mark stepped out, his polished shoes sinking into the gravel, and inhaled deeply. Fairhaven, with its salt-streaked wooden houses and quiet streets, felt like a memory from a simpler time, a place where a boy once chased crabs on the shore, free from the weight of legacy. He checked into the hotel, the clerk's yawn barely registering as Mark's thoughts churned. Sleep eluded him. The confrontation with Marcus and Evelyn replayed in sharp fragments, each word a cut deeper than the last. By mid-morning, restless and craving distraction, he wandered the town's main street, where gulls wheeled overhead and fishing boats bobbed in the distance. His stomach growled, and a faded sign caught his eye: Seaside Cafe. The promise of coffee, and perhaps clarity, drew him in. The bell above the door jingled, announcing his arrival. Inside, the cafe was a warm cocoon of mismatched wooden tables, shelves lined with dog-eared books, and framed photos of Fairhaven's yesteryears. The aroma of fresh coffee mingled with the sweet tang of apple pie, wrapping Mark in an unexpected comfort. Behind the counter, a young woman moved with easy grace, her chestnut hair tied in a messy bun, a flour-dusted apron hinting at a morning spent baking. She flashed a smile at a grizzled man by the window, who raised his mug in salute. "Morning, Elise," he called, and she laughed, her voice a melody that cut through Mark's fog. "Good morning," she said as Mark approached, her hazel eyes meeting his with a curiosity that felt personal. "What can I get you? We've got the best coffee in town, or so Mr. Bill claims." She nodded toward the older man, who winked in confirmation. For the first time in days, Mark's lips curved into a genuine smile. "I'll trust Mr. Bill then. A coffee, please," he replied, settling onto a stool. As she worked the espresso machine, he noticed her name tag, Elise. The name suited her, soft yet strong, like the waves outside. She handed him a steaming mug, her fingers brushing his for a fleeting moment. "You're not from around here, are you?" she asked, tilting her head. "I know every face that walks through this door." Mark hesitated, the weight of his past pressing against his chest. "Just passing through," he said, keeping his tone light. "Needed a break from the city." Elise's smile held a knowing edge, as if she recognized the shadow behind his words. "Fairhaven's good for that. Things are simpler here." He sipped the coffee, its rich warmth grounding him. The cafe buzzed softly, locals exchanging gossip, the clink of cups, Elise greeting each patron by name. She was a sun at the center of this small universe, her ease disarming. "You've worked here long?" Mark asked, craving more of her voice. "A few years," she said, wiping the counter. "Not where I thought I'd be, but it's home for now." Her tone carried a wistful note, a crack in her sunny facade that piqued his curiosity. "Where did you think you'd be?" he pressed, then caught himself, worried he'd overstepped. But Elise didn't flinch. She glanced out the window, where the ocean glittered. "I used to dream of painting, big canvases, wild colors, but life had other plans." She shrugged, a gesture that hid more than it revealed. Mark felt a pang. Her words echoed his own sense of a life derailed. "What about you?" she asked, turning the question back. "What brings you here, besides escaping the city?" The truth, his parents' betrayal, the arranged marriage, lodged in his throat. "Just needed time to think," he said, his voice tighter than intended. Things got complicated. Elise studied him, her gaze soft but piercing, as if she saw the storm he carried. "I get that," she said. "If you need more coffee to sort it out, you know where to find me." She flashed a grin, then turned to another customer, leaving Mark with a strange warmth in his chest. He lingered, watching her move through the cafe, her laughter a beacon in his haze. Elise was unlike anyone from his world of corporate sharks and polished facades. She was real, grounded, yet there was a depth to her, a story, unspoken. As he stepped back into the sunlight, the ocean's rhythm called to him. But it was Elise's smile that lingered, a spark in the darkness of his flight. Fairhaven was no longer just a refuge. It was a crossroads. And though Mark didn't know it yet, the woman behind the counter was about to become the heart of his new beginning. The days in Fairhaven slipped by like waves lapping at the shore, each one eroding the sharp edges of Mark Hayes' anger. The seaside cafe had become his anchor, its worn wooden tables and coffee-scented air a refuge from the storm of his past. Elise, with her quick smile and quiet strength, was the heart of it. Mark found himself returning daily, drawn not just by the brew, but by her. Her, a woman who seemed to carry sunlight in her laughter, yet shadows in her silences. The memory of his father's ultimatum still stung. But in Fairhaven, under the vast coastal sky, Mark felt the stirrings of something new. Possibility. This morning, the cafe buzzed with its usual rhythm. Locals swapping stories, the clatter of dishes, Elise weaving through it all with effortless grace. Mark sat at the counter, nursing a coffee, his gaze lingering as she teased a young girl about her cookie obsession. "You'll turn into a chocolate chip one day, Mia," Elise said, her hazel eyes sparkling. Mark chuckled, and Elise caught his look, arching a brow. "What's so funny, city boy?" "Just wondering how you keep this place from falling apart with all these cookie thieves," he shot back, earning a laugh that warmed him more than the mug in his hands. Their banter had grown easy, a dance of words that felt like a lifeline. But today, Mark wanted more than quips. He wanted to know her, the real Elise, beyond the apron and the smile. "You ever get tired of playing hostess?" he asked, leaning forward. "Running this place, being everyone's friend?" Elise paused, wiping her hands on her apron. "Sometimes," she admitted, her voice softer. "But it's worth it. This place, these people, they're family. Especially after—" She trailed off, her gaze drifting to the window, where gulls soared against the graying sky. Mark sensed a weight in her hesitation. "After what?" he pressed gently, his curiosity tinged with care. She sighed, tucking a stray lock behind her ear. "After my parents died. Car accident years ago. I've been raising my brother Jack ever since. Dreams I had, painting, art, they got put on hold." Her words were matter-of-fact, but the flicker of loss in her eyes cut Mark deep. He thought of his own dreams, smothered by his family's expectations, and felt a kinship. "That's a lot to carry," he said. "You're stronger than you let on." Elise shrugged, a half-smile masking her vulnerability. "You do what you have to. What about you? What's got you hiding out in Fairhaven?" Her question was light, but her eyes searched his, probing for truth. Mark's throat tightened. The arranged marriage, his parents' betrayal, it was too raw to share. "Family drama," he said, forcing a casual tone. "Needed space to figure things out." Her nod was understanding, but he sensed she knew he was holding back. Their conversation was interrupted by a loud drip-drip from the sink behind the counter. Elise groaned. "Not again. This pipe's been trouble all week." Mark, eager to shift the focus, stood. "Let me take a look. I'm no plumber, but I can try." Elise raised a skeptical brow but handed him a wrench, her amusement clear. "Go for it, hero." What followed was a comedy of errors. Mark, more accustomed to boardrooms than toolboxes, fumbled with the pipe, muttering curses as water sprayed his shirt. Elise tried to guide him, but a sudden gush soaked them both. She burst into laughter, clutching her sides as Mark stood drenched, sheepish, but grinning. "Some hero," she teased, tossing him a towel. The shared laughter dissolved the tension, their wet clothes and flushed faces forging a new closeness. "You're not half bad at making a mess," she said, her eyes lingering on his. As they mopped up, the cafe door swung open and Jack, Elise's lanky teenage brother, poked his head in. "Elise, phone call. Sounds important." Her smile faded, and she excused herself, leaving Mark with a damp towel and a nagging curiosity. When she returned, her face was pale, her hands fidgeting. "Everything okay?" Mark asked, concern tightening his chest. "Just business," she said, but her voice was strained. She busied herself with the coffee machine, avoiding his gaze. Mark didn't press, but he caught her glancing at her phone, where a missed call from an unknown number glowed. Later, as he walked back to his hotel, the ocean's restless churn mirrored his thoughts. Elise was hiding something, just as he was. His wealth, the looming deadline from his parents, they were secrets he wasn't ready to share. But Elise's guarded expression gnawed at him. That night, Elise sat alone in her small apartment above the cafe, the phone call replaying in her mind. Her father's lawyer had been blunt. Richard Coleman's estate, millions tainted by his crimes, was hers to claim. But it meant stepping back into a world she'd fled. The name Coleman carried shame, a legacy of fraud and broken lives. Accepting it could secure Jack's future, but at what cost? As she stared at the moonlit waves, Mark's face flashed in her thoughts. His easy grin, his quiet empathy. He was a stranger, yet he felt like an ally. But secrets, she knew, had a way of surfacing, and hers were about to cast a long shadow over Fairhaven. The seaside cafe glowed under the late afternoon sun, its windows reflecting the restless shimmer of Fairhaven's ocean. Inside, Elise moved with practiced ease, pouring coffee and trading laughs with regulars. But her smile was a fragile mask. The lawyer's call from the previous day lingered like a storm cloud. Richard Coleman's tainted millions, a fortune that could change her brother Jack's life, came with a price she wasn't sure she could pay. Mark Hayes, now a fixture at the counter, watched her with quiet concern. Their bond had grown through shared glances and fleeting truths, but the shadow of Elise's unease, glimpsed after that mysterious call, gnawed at him. He sensed she was carrying a burden too heavy for one heart, and his own secrets, his wealth, the arranged marriage, felt like a betrayal he wasn't ready to confess. Mark sipped his coffee, the bitter warmth grounding him as he wrestled with his thoughts. The pipe-fixing fiasco had left them both laughing, water-soaked and closer. But today, Elise's distracted glances at her phone stirred a protective urge. He wanted to ask, to help, but the words caught in his throat. The cafe door swung open, and a man stepped in, his presence jarring against the cozy hum. He was tall, with slicked-back hair and a tailored suit that screamed city, his eyes scanning the room like a predator. Elise froze, her hand tightening around a mug, and Mark's instincts flared. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice steady but laced with tension. The man, Victor Grayson, smirked, his gaze locking onto her. "Elise Coleman, I presume?" "We need to talk." His voice was smooth, edged with menace, and the name Coleman sent a ripple through the cafe. Whispers stirred among the locals. Richard Coleman's infamy was no secret here. Mark's jaw clenched. He didn't know the man, but the threat in his posture was unmistakable. "Not here," Elise said, her tone firm. "Outside." Victor nodded, his smirk widening, and followed her to the patio, leaving Mark gripping his mug, torn between restraint and action. On the patio, under the shade of a faded awning, Victor wasted no time. "Your father's estate," he said, leaning close, "belongs to those he ruined, not you. Sign it over, or I'll make sure everyone knows the Coleman name is still poison, and your brother won't be safe." Elise's breath hitched, her mind flashing to Jack, now 16, unaware of the danger. "You have no right," she hissed. "That money's my chance to make things right." Victor's laugh was cold. "Right? Your father destroyed lives, mine included. You don't get to play hero." Mark, unable to stay seated, pushed through the door, his voice cutting through the tense air. "Is there a problem here?" His stance was calm but unyielding, his city polish giving way to raw resolve. Victor sized him up, unimpressed. "This doesn't concern you, kid." But Elise's eyes met Mark's, a silent plea, and he stepped closer. "It does if you're threatening her." Victor's smirk faltered, but he backed off, tossing a card on the table. "You have until tomorrow, Elise. Don't test me." He strode away, leaving a chill in his wake. Inside, the cafe felt smaller, the walls closing in. Elise sank into a chair, her hands trembling. Mark sat beside her, his voice soft but urgent. "Who is that? What's going on?" She hesitated, the weight of her secret pressing down. Finally she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "My father was Richard Coleman. Fraud, extortion. He hurt so many people. I was 20 when he was arrested, lost everything. I've spent years running from his name, raising Jack, keeping us safe. Now his estate's mine, but it's tied to all that pain. That man, Victor, he was my father's partner. He thinks I don't deserve it, and he's not wrong." Mark listened, his heart aching at her vulnerability. Her strength, masked by her sunny exterior, was staggering. "You're not your father," he said, his voice firm. "That money, it's just a tool. You could use it to help people, to change the story." Elise looked at him, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "What if I can't? What if it makes me like him?" Mark reached for her hand, his touch a quiet anchor. "You won't. You're too good for that." Their moment was broken by Jack bursting in, his school bag slung over his shoulder. "Elise, you okay? Saw some guy out there." She forced a smile, ruffling his hair. "Just business, kiddo. Go help with the dishes." Jack eyed Mark suspiciously, but obeyed. Alone again, Elise squeezed Mark's hand, a fragile trust forming. "Thank you," she said, But this is my fight, Mark nodded. But as he left the cafe, the ocean's restless churn mirrored his resolve. He wouldn't let her face this alone. That night, Elise lay awake, Victor's card burning a hole in her pocket. The money could secure Jack's future, college, stability. But Victor's threat loomed. Mark's words echoed, a lifeline in the dark. "You're too good for that." She wanted to believe him, but the past was a tide pulling her under. Meanwhile, Mark paced his hotel room, his own secrets clawing at him. He hadn't told Elise about his family's deadline, the marriage to Olga Petrova hanging over him. As the waves crashed outside, he knew their truths were on a collision course, and Fairhaven was about to become a battleground. Rain lashed Fairhaven, the sky a bruised expanse of churning clouds. The ocean roared, its waves clawing at the docks as if enraged by the secrets brewing in the small coastal town. Elise Coleman stood behind the Seaside Cafe's counter, her hands unsteady as she wiped down an already spotless surface. Victor Grayson's threat, "Sign it over, or your brother won't be safe," had haunted her through sleepless nights, his card a venomous weight in her pocket. The inheritance from her father, Richard Coleman, was a lifeline for her brother Jack's future. But Victor's vendetta made it a curse. Mark Hayes, now a constant presence in her life, lingered at a corner table, his gaze tracking her every move. Their shared moment after Victor's visit had forged a fragile trust, but Elise's resolve to face this alone wavered under the storm's relentless drum. Mark sensed the shift in her, the way her smile faltered, her eyes darting to the rain-slicked windows. The cafe was nearly empty, the storm keeping locals indoors, and the silence between them crackled with unspoken fears. He wanted to bridge the gap, to tell her about his own looming deadline, his parents' demand to marry Olga Petrova or lose everything. But her burden took precedence. "You've been quiet all day," he said, approaching the counter. "Is it that guy, Victor?" Elise's lips tightened, but she nodded. "He's not backing down. Wants me to meet him tonight at the docks. Says it's my last chance." Mark's blood ran cold. The docks, desolate in this weather, were no place for a negotiation. "You're not going alone," he said, his voice firm. Elise shook her head, her hazel eyes flashing. "Mark, this is my mess. I can't drag you into it." But his hand found hers, warm and steady. "You're not dragging me. I'm choosing to be here." Her resistance softened, a flicker of relief breaking through her fear. Before she could argue, Jack burst through the door, soaked and wide-eyed. "Elise, I saw that creep by the pier. He's bad news, isn't he?" Elise's heart sank. Jack's safety was her anchor, and Victor's threat now felt visceral. "Stay here," she told him, her voice sharp. "I'll handle it." But Mark was already grabbing his jacket. "We're going together," he said, leaving no room for debate. The storm's fury matched their resolve as they stepped into the deluge, the wind tearing at their clothes. The docks loomed ahead, a maze of crates and swaying boats under flickering lamplights. Victor waited, his silhouette menacing against the churning sea, a document in hand, her surrender. "You brought company," Victor sneered, eyeing Mark. "This doesn't concern you." Mark stepped forward, rain streaming down his face. "It does when you threaten her." Elise clutched the papers Victor thrust at her, her fingers trembling as she read the terms. Relinquish the estate, or he'd expose her past and target Jack. "You're no better than my father," she spat, her voice rising above the storm. Victor's laugh was drowned by a crack of thunder. "Sign, or you'll lose more than money," rage surged in Mark, his city polish giving way to raw instinct. He lunged, shoving Victor back, but the older man was quick, grabbing Mark's collar. Elise's cry cut through the chaos. "Stop!" As she tore the papers, the wind scattering them into the sea. Victor's fury erupted, and he swung at Mark, who ducked, his fist grazing Victor's jaw. The scuffle was brief but brutal, interrupted by shouts. Jack, defying Elise's orders, had rallied Mr. Bill and other townsfolk, their flashlights piercing the dark. Outnumbered, Victor stumbled back, his threats swallowed by the storm as he fled into the night. Soaked and shaking, Elise clung to Mark, the waves crashing as if applauding their stand. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered, her voice breaking. Mark's arms tightened around her. "Yes, I did." Back at the cafe, warmed by blankets and coffee, Elise made her choice. "I'm going to the board meeting," she said, her eyes fierce. "I'll take the money, but on my terms. For Jack, for others, not for him." Mark nodded, pride swelling in his chest. Inspired, he slipped outside, the storm now a drizzle, and dialed his father. "I'm not marrying Olga," he said, his voice unwavering. "I'm done living your life." Marcus's response was icy. "Then you're cut off." Mark hung up, the weight of disinheritance heavy, but liberating. He returned to Elise, her determined gaze mirroring his own. They were both defying their pasts, but the cost was steep, and the truth of Mark's identity loomed unspoken. As dawn broke, the board meeting awaited Elise, a chance to reshape her father's legacy. For Mark, Fairhaven was no longer a hideout but a home, yet his silence about his wealth gnawed at him. The ocean's calm after the storm belied the challenges ahead. Victor's retreat was temporary, and their secrets were fraying. Hand in hand, they faced an uncertain future, their courage a beacon in the gathering light. The morning after the storm, Fairhaven glistened under a tentative sun, the ocean's surface smooth as glass, as if cleansed of its fury. Elise Coleman stood outside the seaside cafe, her breath catching at the memory of Victor Grayson's retreat, driven off by Mark Hayes, Jack, and the townsfolk. The victory was fleeting. The board meeting to claim her father's inheritance loomed, a daunting step toward rewriting Richard Coleman's toxic legacy. Mark, now more than a stranger who'd stumbled into her cafe, had stood by her, his courage in the rain a tether to her resolve. Yet, his silence about his own burdens, hinted at, but never shared, cast a subtle shadow over their growing bond. Inside the cafe, the usual hum of chatter felt distant as Elise prepared for the meeting. Mark arrived, his presence steadying, but his eyes held a new weight. His call to his father, rejecting the arranged marriage to Olga Petrova, had severed his ties to the Hayes fortune. He hadn't told Elise the full scope of his sacrifice, fearing it might overwhelm her own struggle. "You ready for today?" he asked, sliding onto a stool. Elise nodded, her fingers twisting a dishcloth. "I think so, but it feels like stepping into a lion's den." "You're not alone," Mark said, his voice soft but firm. "You're doing this for Jack, for something good." His words echoed their storm-soaked promise, and Elise managed to smile, though her heart raced. Before she could respond, the cafe door swung open and a woman entered. Elegant, her tailored coat out of place among the weathered tables. Evelyn Hayes, Mark's mother, carried an air of authority that silenced the room. Mark stiffened, his jaw tight. "Mom? What are you doing here?" Evelyn's gaze was cool, assessing. "We need to talk, Mark. Now." Her tone brooked no argument, but Elise sensed the undercurrent of desperation. Mark glanced at Elise, a silent apology, and followed Evelyn outside. On the patio, Evelyn's composure cracked. "You're throwing everything away," she said, her voice low. "Your father's cut you off, but there's still time. Come back. Marry Olga, secure your future." Mark's laugh was bitter. "My future isn't yours to control. I'm staying here." Elise, overhearing from the doorway, felt a jolt. "Marry? Cut off." The words painted Mark as someone far beyond the drifter she'd imagined. A wealthy heir, like the world she'd fled. Doubt crept in. Was he running from responsibility? Using Fairhaven as a game? She retreated to the cafe, her thoughts churning. Mark returned, his face drawn, but Elise's guarded expression stopped him. "You okay?" he asked. She hesitated, then said, "I need to focus on the meeting. We'll talk later." Her voice was clipped, and Mark felt the distance like a physical ache. That afternoon, Elise drove to the city for the board meeting, her resolve stealing with each mile. Alone in her studio later, sorting through old sketches, she found a hidden letter in her father's handwriting, tucked inside a forgotten sketchbook. "Elise, I failed you. I chased power, lost myself. If you read this, know I'm sorry." Tears blurred her vision. The words, raw and repentant, eased a wound she'd carried for years. Her father's regret didn't erase his crimes, but it freed her to see the inheritance as a tool, not a chain. Mark, restless, walked Fairhaven's beach, the sunset bleeding crimson across the waves. Elise's withdrawal stung, and he knew he'd delayed too long. He found her at the studio, the letter clutched in her hands, her eyes red but clear. "He was sorry," she said, her voice trembling. "I can forgive him. Maybe use this money to make things right." Mark knelt beside her, his heart pounding. "You're incredible, Elise, but I haven't been honest." The truth poured out. His family's tech empire, the arranged marriage to a tycoon's daughter, the deadline that cost him everything. "I stayed for me, but also for you," he admitted. "I'm falling for you." Elise's breath caught, her earlier doubts warring with his sincerity. "You should have told me," she said, but her hand found his. "I need you to choose this life for you, not me." Mark nodded, the weight of his secrecy lifting. As the sun dipped below the horizon, he led her to the beach, the sand cool under their feet. "I've made my choice," he said, pulling a small ring from his pocket, its simple band glinting in the fading light. "Elise, you've shown me what matters. Love, truth, a life that's mine. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down her face, a laugh breaking through. "Yes, Mark, yes." They embraced, the waves a chorus to their vow, the tide washing away their fears. Back at the cafe, Jack grinned, sensing the shift. "You two look happy," he teased. Elise's joy was tempered by the board meeting's outcome. She'd demanded the inheritance fund community art, a bold move with risks. Mark, too, faced uncertainty, his disinheritance a blank slate. As they stood together, the ocean's rhythm promised challenges, but also hope. Their truths had surfaced, binding them closer, but Fairhaven's embrace, and the whispers of Elise's past, awaited their next step. The sun dipped toward the horizon, casting a golden veil over Fairhaven's beach, where wildflowers swayed in the salt-kissed breeze. Elise Coleman stood barefoot in the sand, her simple white dress catching the light, a creation she'd stitched with a friend's help. Her heart raced, not from nerves, but from the certainty that this moment, her wedding to Mark Hayes, was the truest she'd ever known. Days ago, his proposal under the sunset's glow had sealed their promise. His ring, a modest band that felt weightier than any fortune. Now, the seaside town buzzed with anticipation. Its people gathered in a crescent of mismatched chairs, their faces alight with joy. Mark, in a navy linen suit, stood at the driftwood altar, his eyes locked on hers, a smile that promised forever. The ceremony began with a hush, the ocean's rhythm a hymn for their union. Jack, Elise's brother, stood proudly beside her, his teenage awkwardness replaced by a grin that spoke of family reborn. Their vows were raw, unscripted. "You helped me forgive my past," Elise said, her voice trembling with emotion, "and showed me love is about who we choose to be." Mark's voice was steady but thick. "I was lost until you, Elise. I promised to be the man you see in me." The waves seemed to cheer as they kissed, The crowd's applause a roaring tide. Even Evelyn Hayes, Mark's mother, seated stiffly at first, dabbed her eyes, her icy reserve melting under the sisters' warmth. The reception unfolded at the Horizon Inn, a dreamlike Mark had poured his heart into. A quaint, clapboard retreat with string lights twinkling over a veranda where locals had laid out homemade dishes. Elise's art studio, a stone's throw away, glowed nearby. Its first mural, a vibrant swirl of waves and stars, unveiled as a wedding gift to the town. The couple moved through the crowd, their hands entwined, their laughter mingling with fiddles and laughter. Mr. Bill, the cafe's stalwart, pulled Mark into a clumsy waltz, earning hoots. Yet, amid the joy, Elise caught whispers, glances from newcomers who'd read of her ties to Richard Coleman, the disgraced tycoon whose fortune now funded her art. The murmurs grew bold the next day at the cafe, where Elise resumed her work, her apron back over her dress. A customer, a wiry man with a sneer, muttered loudly, "Coleman's money must buy nice paintbrushes." Elise's cheeks burned, her hands faltering on a coffee pot. Before she could respond, Mark, at his usual stool, rose, his voice calm but razor-sharp. "You don't know her story. She's earned everything she's built more than most." His defense was a shield, silencing the man, who left with a word. Later, alone by the cafe's porch, Elise touched his arm. "You can't fight every battle for me," she said, her voice soft. Mark's smile was fierce. "I know, but you're not alone." Their new life took shape with fervor. The Horizon Inn opened its doors, its cozy rooms filling with travelers drawn by tales of Fairhaven's charm. Mark greeted each guest, his city polish now a warm welcome, finding purpose in their stories. Elise's studio became a haven for young artists, her classes brimming with kids wielding brushes like swords. Her painting, Horizon of the Heart, a canvas of their love's journey, crashing waves, a dawn breaking, drew gasps from visitors, a silent vow to her father's redemption. Evelyn, seeking a bridge to her son, arrived unannounced, bearing a box of fine brushes. "For the students," she said, her voice hesitant. Elise accepted it, sensing a crack in her armor, a gesture toward healing. Yet the Coleman whispers persisted, a shadow over their joy. At a local market, a woman's cold stare cut Elise as she bought flowers. "Oil money!" she hissed. Elise stood tall, but the sting lingered, a reminder of the past's reach. She confided in Mark that night as they walked the beach, the inn's lights a beacon behind them. "I thought I could look past it," she said, her voice low. "What if they never see me?" Mark stopped, his hands cupping her face. "They will. We'll show them who we are. Together." His certainty anchored her, the ocean's rhythm a promise of endurance. The community's embrace countered the skepticism. When a pipe burst at the inn, Mr. Bill and Jack rallied neighbors to fix it, their laughter echoing the cafe's water-soaked day. Elise taught a free class for teens, her patience winning over a shy girl who'd once scoffed at her name. Mark's vision for the inn grew, a place not just for rest, but for renewal, like Fairhaven itself. As they lay in bed, planning, Elise sketched on a notepad, her ring catching the lamplight. "We're building something real," she said, her hand finding his. Mark nodded, his heart full but wary. Evelyn's visits hinted at change, her stories of her own stifled dreams softening Mark's guard. But the Coleman stigma loomed, a test of their resilience. As the horizon glowed, Mark and Elise knew their love was unshakable. But the world beyond Fairhaven sands held challenges. Their vows were their compass, the inn and studio their map, guiding them toward a future where love would face its shadows and shine brighter still. The sun sank over Fairhaven, its amber glow kissing the waves that had witnessed Mark and Elise Hayes' journey from strangers to soulmates. 20 years had passed since their beachside vows. Yet the town's timeless charm, its salt-worn docks, the hum of gulls, remained a steadfast backdrop to their love. The Horizon Inn stood proud, its white clapboards now a regional landmark, while Elise's Fairhaven Art Center pulsed with creativity, a beacon for dreamers. Their children, Sophie, 8, with her mother's painterly hands, Benjamin, 6, a storyteller of pirate tales, and Elliot, a toddling bundle of curiosity, filled their days with laughter. But life, like the ocean, brought storms, and Mark and Elise had weathered them all. Their bond, a lighthouse in the darkest gales. The inn, once a fledgling dream, now drew travelers from afar, each room a story Mark cherished. He greeted guests with a warmth honed by years of listening, his once polished demeanor softened by Fairhaven's rhythm. A winter storm had once torn shingles from the roof, threatening their livelihood, but the townsfolk, Mr. Bill, wielding a hammer, and Jack, now a college graduate, hauling lumber, had rebuilt it stronger. Elise's studio, born from her father's tainted inheritance, had grown into a cultural hub. Her painting, Horizon of the Heart, a swirl of dawn and sea, hung in a city gallery. Yet, she refused urban offers. "This is home," she'd say, her hazel eyes on the waves. Their children were their greatest masterpiece. Sophie, sketching beside Elise, mirrored her mother's quiet fire, her canvases vibrant with promise. Benjamin roamed the beach, spinning tales of hidden treasure, his imagination boundless. Elliot, barely 2, giggled as Mark tossed him skyward, his squeals echoing over the dunes. But Fairhaven's embrace wasn't flawless. Whispers of Elise Coleman's ties lingered, resurfacing when a local paper ran a piece on Richard Coleman's scandal. At the cafe, a tourist's snide remark, "Blood money funds that art, huh?" stung Elise, but she met it with grace. "I paint to heal, not hide," she said, her voice steady, and Mark's proud gaze bolstered her. Evelyn Hayes, once a symbol of control, had transformed. She'd moved to Fairhaven, her seaside cottage a short walk from the inn. Gone was the rigid matriarch. In her place was a grandmother braiding Sophie's hair, sharing stories of her own stifled dreams. During a studio event, Evelyn confessed to Elise, "I pushed Mark because I feared losing him. You gave him freedom." Elise squeezed her hand, a silent truce. Evelyn's visits brought gifts, science kits for Elliot, books for Benjamin, her laughter mingling with the children's, a melody Mark never thought he'd hear. Challenges tested their resolve. A slow season strained the inn's finances. But Mark's idea, creative retreats led by Elise and local artists, turned winter into a cultural draw, putting Fairhaven on maps. When a teen at Elise's studio defaced a mural, blaming her dirty money, Jack, now a business major, mediated, turning the act into a community project. The mural, reborn with vibrant hands, became a symbol of redemption. Elise's classes grew, her patience coaxing talent from shy kids, her own art soaring. A collector's purchase of her latest peace-funded scholarships, silencing doubters. The 20th anniversary of the Horizon Inn was a celebration of their legacy. The beach glowed with lanterns, tables laden with local dishes. Jack, now married with a child, returned, reminiscing about hauling chairs as a teen. Guests from years past shared tales, couples who'd found love, artists inspired by Elise's studio. Mark took the stage, his voice thick. "This inn isn't just walls, it's our heart, built with you all." Elise, beside him, added, "Fairhaven gave us ourselves, and we're grateful for every soul here." The crowd cheered, Sophie and Benjamin darting through, Elliot asleep in Evelyn's arms. That night, Mark and Elise sat on their beach, the same sands where they'd vowed their love. Sophie's kite soared above, Benjamin's laughter a distant song. "Do you think we dream too big?" Mark asked, his hand in hers. Elise smiled, her sketchbook open to a new design, a community center for Fairhaven. "No dream's too big with you," she said, leaning into him. The Coleman stigma had faded, not gone, but was powerless against their truth. Evelyn's silhouette joined the kids, a family whole in ways Mark once thought impossible. As the stars emerged, Mark traced Elise's ring, the same simple band from their proposal. "You changed my life," he said, his voice soft. "And mine," she replied, her head on his shoulder. Their children's voices carried on the breeze, the inn's lights a warm glow. Fairhaven wasn't just where they'd found love. It was where they'd built a legacy. The ocean whispered its approval, its tides carrying their story forward, timeless and unbroken, a testament to courage, redemption, and a love that conquered all. What a journey Mark and Elise have taken us on. A tale of courage, love, and redemption that proves destiny can find us in the unlikeliest places. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Did their story touch your heart? What would you have done in their shoes? Drop a comment below and share your feelings. Or tell us where you're listening from to join our global family. A huge thank you for being part of this emotional ride. Your support means the world. Subscribe and hit the bell to never miss another heartfelt story. Until next time, keep believing in love's power to change everything. See you soon.